The bus rolled past the cracked welcome sign just after noon. Welcome to Clearwater, where the river meets the heart. The paint had peeled enough that heart looked more like heat. I hadn't been back in 5 years, and even the letters seemed tired. Through the smudged window, the town looked smaller than I remembered. The gas station had turned into a vape shop. The old hardware store, my grandfather's haunt, was boarded up. And down by the river, through the gaps in the trees, I saw the roof of the boathouse sagging like an old man's back. When I stepped off the bus, the air smelled of pine and diesel, of things that don't hurry. My duffel bag felt heavier than it should have. Maybe it was the job I'd quit, or the promotion I'd ruined, or the voicemail from Mom saying, "If you're not too busy failing, your grandfather's place could use a visit." Clearwater's main street stretched like a sentence nobody had finished. I walked past the diner Dell's place, and through the open door came the hiss of the fryer and my mother's voice, sharp as ever. "Ethan Ward, if that's you standing there with city dirt on your shoes, wipe them before you come in." I smiled, because of course she knew. She always did. Mom looked the same, only her hair had surrendered more to the gray. She hugged me like she was making sure I was real, then shoved a mug of coffee into my hand. "So," she said, wiping her hands on her apron, "how's the big city treating its prodigal son?" "Let's just say I left before it could finish the job," I said. She gave me that look, the one that mixed disappointment and hope in equal measure. We sat in a booth near the window. Outside, the river flashed between buildings, a streak of stubborn silver. Mom finally sighed. "Your grandfather's boathouse, someone needs to take care of it before it sinks for good." "I'll look at it," I said, too quickly. She raised an eyebrow. "Don't look. Fix one thing that stays fixed. You owe the old man that much." The words landed heavier than the coffee cup. Grandpa and Lou had built boats for 40 years. I used to hand him nails, pretending I understood the rhythm of his world. He died last spring before I could make it home. The funeral photos still felt like borrowed grief. I finished the coffee, said I'd walk down to the river, and stepped back into the heat. The boathouse stood crooked at the edge of the water, its reflection warped in the current. The door creaked open under my hand, revealing dust, silence, and the faint scent of oil and cedar. On the workbench sat a small wooden box, my name carved into the lid. Inside, a folded letter. "Ethan, if you're reading this, you've found the place I loved most. Wood rots, nails rust, but a man's hands remember. Build something worth remembering. Lou." I read it twice, then looked around the hollow shell of the boathouse. Sunlight slanted through the broken boards, sketching bright stripes on the floor. The river moved outside, patient and unbothered. For the first time in months, I felt still, and maybe, just maybe, ready to start again. By the next morning, the smell of bacon and burnt coffee drifted through Dell's place long before sunrise. I'd barely slept, half from jet lag, half from that letter still looping through my head. Mom was already behind the counter, flipping pancakes with military precision. "You either eat or work," she said without looking up. "Pick a side." "I'll take the work," I answered, and she slid a rag toward me like a baton. So I wiped tables, refilled creamers, took orders from the regulars who all pretended not to notice me. But Clearwater folks have a way of watching without staring. Old Mr. Hensley from the barber shop squinted at me over his eggs. "Lou's boy, right? Heard you're fixing the boathouse." I hesitated, trying to. "Good." He forked another bite. "That place taught half this town how to hold a hammer. Be ashamed to let it rot." By noon, the diner buzzed with heat and chatter. Ava Monroe walked in, sunlight in her hair, clipboard in hand. She hadn't changed much since high school, still that quick, practical smile, still the same eyes that could slice through excuses. "Ethan Ward," she said, stopping by the counter. "Didn't expect to see you back before Christmas." "Didn't expect to be back at all," I said. She nodded toward my rag. "Volunteering or paying off a tab?" "Community service," Mom cut in, grinning. "Sentence, 1 boathouse restoration, indefinite term." Ava laughed, the sound sharp and easy. "We're doing a river cleanup Saturday morning. You should come. See what you're fixing the boathouse for." "I'll be there," I said before I could overthink it. Mom raised her brows but said nothing. After the rush died down, she poured 2 cups of coffee and sat across from me. The diner hummed with the low rhythm of ceiling fans and distant talk. She set her mug down carefully. "You always ran from things, Ethan. Jobs, fights, plans. You run good, but you can't run a life that way." "I know." "Then don't just know. Promise me something." "What?" She looked straight into me. "Fix that boathouse. Not for me, not for Lou, for you. Do one thing all the way through. That's how you build a spine." I wanted to joke, to lighten it, but her gaze pinned me like a nail through soft wood. So I nodded. "I promise," I said. She smiled faintly, like she didn't quite believe me, but wanted to. Then it settled. The oath of the diner. Outside, thunder murmured somewhere far off, the kind that warns more than it threatens. I watched rain light flicker across the window, thinking how promises, like rivers, start small, but once they move, they carve everything in their path. Saturday morning arrived with the smell of wet earth and the sound of distant lawnmowers. The river shimmered pale gold under early light, its surface broken by fallen branches and plastic bottles that caught the sun like ugly jewelry. I parked Mom's old pickup near the bridge. The bed rattled with buckets, gloves, and a cooler that held more doubt than water. Ava was already there, standing on the dock with a group of volunteers, half high school kids, half locals who looked like they hadn't skipped a cleanup day in years. She wore a faded blue t-shirt that said, "Clearwater, clear heart." It fit her mission perfectly. "Look who actually showed up," she said when she saw me. "Told you I would." "Yeah," she said, handing me a trash bag. "You also told me you'd come to senior prom." We both remember how that ended. I winced. Touché. We started along the riverbank, pulling out bottles tangled in reeds. The mud sucked at my shoes like it wanted me to stay. "Why do you still do this?" I asked after a while. "Seems like the same garbage just comes back." She shrugged. "So does the rain. Doesn't mean you stop planting." That shut me up. Ava always had a way of making hard work sound like truth. A younger kid, 16, maybe, was using a broken rake to pull debris closer. Skinny, dark hair, restless energy. The others called him Migs. When his rake snapped, I jogged over. Hold on. I grabbed a branch, tied it to the handle with my belt, crude but solid. Try that. He stared at me like I just performed a magic trick, then grinned. Nice. You fix stuff? Sometimes, I said. Mostly I break it first. Migs laughed. It was the first real sound of the morning that wasn't the river. By noon, the bank looked almost new, still rough, but breathing again. Ava stood beside me, hair sticking to her forehead, gloves streaked with mud. You surprised me, she said. I surprise myself lately. She gave me a long look, half curious, half skeptical. Then, prove it. The boathouse, get it standing again. We could use it for next month's fundraiser. Fundraiser? River Conservancy Drive. We need a place to host the event. Lou's old place would mean something. I hesitated, watching sunlight spark on the water. That's a lot in 4 weeks. She smirked. Guess we'll see if this time you finish what you start. And there it was, Ava's test. Not a challenge spoken in anger, but in faith disguised as doubt. As I packed up the truck, Migs ran over, holding the patched rake. Hey, man, you working on that boathouse? I can help. I'm good with engines. Boats don't have engines, kid. Then I'll learn. Something about the way he said it made me nod. All right, Migs. Monday morning. When I looked back at the river, the current had changed direction with the wind, rippling toward the boathouse. It felt like a sign, small but sure. Maybe faith wasn't waiting for proof. Maybe it was showing up, mud on your boots, and doing the work anyway. By Monday morning, the sun had burned off the mist, and the river looked honest again. No magic, just work waiting to happen. Migs showed up 10 minutes early, backpack slung over one shoulder, his hair still damp. You weren't kidding about starting early, he said, yawning. Boats don't build themselves, I told him. We stood in front of the boathouse. The old wooden beams sagged like tired shoulders, the smell of rot and river mud thick in the air. When I pushed open the door, a family of swallows burst out, slicing the air with their wings. Whoa, Migs said. This place could eat us alive. That's the point, I said. We teach it some manners. We spent the first hour clearing debris-rusted tools, cracked planks, a calendar from 2009 still pinned to the wall. Migs found an old photo under a pile of rope. Grandpa Lou standing beside a half-built skiff, grin wide as the river behind him. Your granddad looked cool, he said. He was, I answered quietly. Knew how to fix everything except people. By noon, sweat glued my shirt to my back. The floorboards groaned every time we moved, but we'd managed to carve out a small island of space near the workbench. I brushed the dust off Grandpa's toolbox, still solid after decades. Inside, his tools gleamed faintly in the dim light worn smooth by hands that never rushed. There was something comforting about the weight of a hammer you didn't buy yourself. We pried loose the rotted boards near the waterline. The mud beneath squelched up, rich and dark. My fingers sank into it as I steadied a new plank. Feels gross, Mig said. Yeah, I said, smiling despite myself. But that's how you know you're doing something real. We worked until our shadows stretched long across the dock. Ava stopped by just as we were packing up, a paper bag in hand. Peace offering, she said. diner sandwiches. Mom told me you'd forget to eat. She's right, I admitted, taking one. You came to inspect or feed? Both. She walked around, stepping carefully on the uneven floor. You've made progress. Barely started, I said. Starting's the hardest part, she replied. Migs wolfed down his sandwich and wiped his hands on his jeans. You guys sound like a motivational poster. Ava laughed, and I couldn't help joining in. The sound filled the boathouse, bouncing off the beams like it belonged there. Before she left, Ava set a folded sheet on the workbench. Here, River Cleanup Committee approved a mini grant. $200 for materials. Don't waste it on fancy nails. I blinked. You serious? Consider it encouragement, she said, smiling. And maybe a down payment on that fundraiser spot. When the door closed behind her, the air felt lighter. Migs looked at me. Guess we're official now. Guess so. We stood there a moment longer, watching the last light spill through the cracks in the wall. The river outside whispered against the shore, steady and low. And in that quiet, something inside me shifted a small, sure click, like a nail seating perfectly into wood. The next few days blurred together into a rhythm of sawdust, sweat, and second guesses. Every time I thought we were making progress, the boathouse reminded me how much decay could hide beneath the surface. The west wall was worse than I expected. Once I pulled away the outer boards, the beams crumbled like stale bread. Termites had made a city of a tiny architects of failure. Migs whistled low. Dude, this place is dying. Not yet, I said, though my stomach disagreed. We took photos, made lists, priced materials online. Even with the small grant, the math didn't work. Lumber had tripled in cost since Grandpa's time, and my savings were mostly good intentions. By late afternoon, I sat on the dock, staring at the water, as if it might balance the budget for me. The current moved slow and heavy, like an old song. Migs kicked his boots against a piling. So what now? I don't know, I admitted. I guess we fix what we can. He shrugged. My uncle works construction. Maybe he's got leftover wood. I can ask. That'd help. He nodded, then squinted at the horizon. You ever think about just starting over somewhere else? All the time, I said. But you carry yourself wherever you go. Hard to outrun your own shadow. Migs thought about that, then smirked. Sounds like something my mom would post on Facebook. Yeah, I laughed, and get 2 likes. We worked in silence after that, side by side. There was comfort in the noise of tools, the scrape, the hammer, the occasional curse. Real life never sounded neat. As the sun dropped, I went through Grandpa's old chest under the workbench. Inside were notebooks bound with leather straps, pages yellowed and soft. His handwriting was sharp, deliberate. On one page he'd drawn the frame of a boat, meticulous lines, angles, weight notes. But in the margin, smaller words caught my eye. Every board remembers the hands that shaped it. Strength is not in the wood, it's in the will behind it. I traced the letters with my thumb, the ink faint but steady. Grandpa wasn't just leaving plans. He was leaving instructions for courage. When I looked up, Ava was standing in the doorway, her hair caught in the dying light. Didn't mean to interrupt, she said. Just checking in. You're still here. Barely, I said, holding up the notebook. But he left me a manual. She stepped closer, glancing at the page. Looks like more than a manual. Maybe a reminder. She smiled. Then keep reading. After she left, I placed the notebook on the bench and took a deep breath. The rot was real, yes, but so was the blueprint. And maybe that was enough for now, to keep your hands moving, even when the wood beneath them threatens to give way. The next morning, I found a note taped to the diner's back door. Town Hall, 10 a.m. Mayor Collins wants to see you. Wear a clean shirt. Mom. That last line was underlined twice. Clearwater's Town Hall sat between the library and the post office, a squat brick building that smelled faintly of lemon polish and paper debt. Mayor Ruth Collins had run this town since I was a kid. She was part steel, part grandmother, and her office walls were a museum of framed fishing photos and newspaper clippings. When I stepped in, she looked up over her glasses. "You're Lou Ward's grandson?" "Yes, ma'am." "Your mother tells me you're patching up his boathouse." "Trying to," I said. She set down her pen. "You filed no permit. Didn't know I needed one." "You always need one," she said flatly, "even for good intentions. The boathouse is technically on river easement land. You fix it wrong, the county fines me. Then I fine you." I tried to smile. Guess we're both motivated then. She almost laughed, but stopped short. "You remind me of your grandfather. Thought rules were suggestions. Guess it runs in the family." She leaned back. "Look, Ethan, I'm not here to shut you down. The town's got a grant for riverfront revitalization. Small money, big paperwork. If you can prove the structure's safe and open for community use, I can allocate a portion to your project." "How much are we talking?" $2,000, maybe $2,500 if the council approves." That number hit like sunlight through a crack. "What do you need from me?" "Blueprints, safety inspection, progress photos, and a community sponsor, someone other than your mother. Ava Monroe's leading the cleanup committee. She might sign off." "Good. Bring the paperwork Friday. Don't make me chase you." "Yes, ma'am." As I left, she added, "And tell your mother her pies are still the reason I run for re-election." Outside, the heat shimmered above Main Street. My truck sputtered before starting, coughing like an old smoker. I patted the dashboard. "Hang in there, buddy. We're both running on fumes." Back at the boathouse, Migs was balancing on a sawhorse, painting the new beams with sealant. "How'd it go with the boss lady?" He called down. "She's letting us live for now," I said. "But we need blueprints and an inspection." He grinned. "You're talking to an artist?" "Sort of." His blueprint ended up being a rough pencil sketch on notebook paper, complete with stick figures labeled "me" and "the guy who complains a lot." I laughed. "Hey, it's a start." Ava arrived later that afternoon, holding iced coffees like peace treaties. "Heard you met the mayor," she said. "I survived." She passed me one cup. "Then you deserve caffeine and sympathy. What's the verdict?" She wants permits, photos, and proof we won't drown anyone. "That's fair," she said. "You fixing a community landmark, you're not just building wood. You're rebuilding trust." Her words landed softer than they sounded, but they stayed. We stood by the open doorway, looking out at the river turning copper in the late light. For the first time, I didn't see decay. I saw potential. Maybe that's what rebuilding really was, learning to see what could still stand. By Thursday afternoon, the sky had turned the color of unspoken trouble, heavy, gray, and thinking about thunder. The weather app said light showers. The river said otherwise. Migs stood at the edge of the dock, watching the current churn. "You sure this thing's gonna hold?" "Sure enough to try," I said, tightening the last rope brace. We'd been working since dawn, trying to reinforce the western wall before the weekend storm hit. Ava had stopped by with extra tarps and a warning. "Don't get heroic. Just keep it standing." Easier said than done. The new beams were solid, but the old ones creaked like bones with secrets. Every gust of wind felt like a test. By late afternoon, the first drops fell slow, deliberate. Migs pursed softly. "Here we go." We moved faster, dragging the tarps across the roof, hammering nails into damp wood. Thunder rolled over the hills, closer each time. The air thickened with rain and adrenaline. When the storm broke, it didn't ask permission. Sheets of water hammered the river, blurring the world into motion. We shouted over the noise, voices lost in the roar. "Hold the line," I yelled, gripping the tarp edge as the wind tried to rip it away. Migs braced beside me, soaked, eyes wide with a mix of fear and something fiercer, commitment. A flash split the sky. For a heartbeat, everything was white. Then darkness again, louder than before. Ava appeared in the doorway, raincoat half-zipped, shouting, "You're both insane." "Probably," I shouted back. "Get inside." She did, only to grab a hammer and start helping us nail down the tarp edges. For 30 minutes, it was chaos, the kind that burns itself into memory. Mud underfoot, wind in our ears, water everywhere. But somehow the structure held. When the worst passed, we stood there dripping, panting, staring at what we'd saved. The boathouse, battered but upright, a stubborn silhouette against the flashing river. Migs whooped, punching the air. We did it. Ava leaned on the railing, breathless, laughing through the rain. "You're both idiots," she said, "but persistent ones." "Persistence is the polite word for stubborn," I said, grinning. She smiled back. "Then Clearwater needs more of that." The rain eased into a soft patter. The river, swollen and wild, glimmered with lightning's reflection. I felt something settle inside me, a calm shaped like pride, or maybe belonging. Migs pulled off his soaked cap. "So what now, boss?" "Now?" I said. "Now we wait for the sun." The storm left behind a silence that felt almost holy. For the first time in weeks, the river was calm, muddy, swollen, but breathing again. The air smelled like new beginnings, wrapped in wet wood and earth. Migs showed up early, holding 2 cups of gas station coffee. "One's for you," he said. "The other's for motivation." "Which is which?" He shrugged. "Doesn't matter. They taste the same." We laughed and got to work. The storm had torn off part of the siding and flooded the lower planks, but nothing beyond repair. Each nail we drove in sounded sharper, more certain, as if the boathouse itself was cheering us on. By noon, Ava arrived with paint samples and a camera. "Mayor Collins wants progress photos," she said. And I want proof you're not both sleeping here. Only napping, Migs said, dead serious. She rolled her eyes. You two are hopeless. Still, she smiled as she walked the perimeter, snapping pictures. You've done a lot, she said finally. It looks alive again. That's the goal, I said. We broke for lunch on the dock. The sun had returned, sharp and bright, turning every droplet into a diamond. Ava sat beside me, her feet dangling just above the water. You ever think about leaving again? She asked. Used to, I said. Now I think about staying. She nodded slowly. You were different back then. Restless, like you couldn't stand still without a plan. I still don't have one, I admitted. But maybe plans aren't what make you steady. A small smile crossed her face. You sound like Lou? I'll take that as a compliment. It is. Migs threw a pebble that skipped twice before sinking. You guys talk like a Netflix drama, he said. All emotional and stuff? Shut up and eat your sandwich, Ava said, laughing. The afternoon passed, an easy rhythm hammer, sand, laugh, repeat. The kind of work that didn't need music because the sound of progress was enough. When we finished for the day, the boathouse gleamed pale gold in the sunset. The reflection rippled across the river, whole for the first time. Ava stepped closer, running her fingers along the railing. You did it. We did it, I said. Even the kid. Migs grinned. Hey, don't forget me when this place gets famous. I smiled. I'll put your name on a plaque, resident engineer and occasional philosopher. He laughed, and for the first time I realized how much lighter his eyes looked. Ava took one last photo, framing the boathouse, the river, and the three of us standing there. This, she said softly, is what second chances look like. And as the light faded, I thought maybe she was right. Because second chances weren't miracles, they were made, nail by nail, by people who stayed when it would have been easier to leave. The morning of the reopening smelled like sawdust and hope. A thin layer of mist drifted over the river, glowing pale gold under the sunrise. For once, Clearwater felt awake before the day officially began. We'd strung small white lights along the dock and polished every board until it shone. The boathouse, Grandpa Lou's boathouse, stood proud and whole again. It wasn't perfect, but neither was he. Neither was I. Mom showed up first, carrying a tray of pies like an offering to the gods of small-town gatherings. You actually did it, she said, half in disbelief. Team effort, I replied. Don't be modest, she said, then added, but if you mess up the ribbon cutting, I'm still telling everyone you cried. Fair, I said. By 10 o'clock, the whole town seemed to have gathered Mayor Collins in her sun hat. Kids waving homemade flags, even the barber and his dog. The river glimmered behind us like it was listening in. Ava stood beside me, her hair pulled back, clipboard in hand. She'd organized everything with military precision, speakers, refreshments, donations, the works. Ready? She asked. As I'll ever be. She nodded toward the ribbon stretched across the dock. Then do the honors, Mr. Ward. My hands trembled a little as I took the scissors. The town clapped, phones raised, Migs chanting speech. Speech. From the back. I laughed. All right, I said. I'll keep it short. My grandfather built this place so people could be near the river, not above it. He believed the water remembers those who respect it. I think he was right. I paused, scanning the faces: Ava's proud smile, Migs's restless grin, Mom dabbing her eyes. We rebuilt this with borrowed wood, free hands, and a lot of second chances. So if you ever doubt you can start over, come stand by the water. It'll remind you how. The crowd applauded. The scissors snipped. The ribbon fluttered into the river and floated away, caught in the slow-turning current. And just like that, Clearwater had a heartbeat again. The rest of the day blurred into color and laughter: kids painting little boats, live music from the diner owner's cousin, and someone spilling lemonade on the mayor's shoes. At sunset, when the last of the crowd drifted home, I sat on the dock beside Ava and Migs. The water mirrored the sky in streaks of orange and rose. "You did it," Ava said quietly. "We did it," I corrected. Migs kicked his boots against the wood. "Feels weird, you know? Like it's not just a building anymore." "It isn't," I said. "It's proof." "Of what?" Ava asked. "That we're allowed to begin again." The river turned with the evening wind, carrying away the last pieces of sunlight. And I realized the name Grandpa gave this town wasn't about the water, it was about us. We were the ones meant to keep moving, to turn, to start over, and to shine again. It happened 2 days after the reopening. Sunday morning, clear skies, the kind that trick you into thinking nothing could go wrong. I was halfway through breakfast at the diner when Migs burst in, breathless, rain boots on though it hadn't rained. "Ethan, you need to come." Now, something in his face froze my stomach. We raced to the river. The boathouse door hung open, crooked. Inside, chaos. Someone had kicked in the storage cabinets, spray-painted the walls, and scattered tools across the floor. The words "Stay out" were scrawled in black across the side wall, ugly and loud. Ava arrived moments later, eyes wide. "Who would?" I didn't answer. I was too busy staring at the wreckage, the paint still dripping down the boards like slow tears. Migs kicked at a fallen hammer. "I'll find who did this." "No," I said quietly. "We fix it first." He looked up, angry. "Why? So they can just do it again?" "Because that's not what this place is for," I said. My voice cracked, but I meant it. We don't build to fight. We build to last. He stood there for a long second, then nodded, shoulders still shaking. We spent the rest of the day cleaning. Ava scrubbed paint until her hands went raw. Migs swept debris into piles without speaking. I rehung every tool, every plank, slower this time, each movement a kind of prayer. By sunset, the place was almost whole again. The scars were visible, but maybe that was the point. Ava leaned against the doorframe, exhausted. "People can be awful." "Yeah," I said, tightening one last nail. "But we get to decide if we answer with that or with something better." She watched me for a long time, then smiled softly. "You really have changed." "I had good teachers," I said, glancing at her and Migs. Migs groaned. "If this turns into another speech, I'm quitting." "Not a speech," I said, "just a thank you." Outside, the river reflected the last light of day bruised purple and gold. The current moved slow, deliberate, as if carrying the weight of everything we'd built and lost and built again. Ava came to stand beside me. You think it's finally over? No, I said. It's never over. It just turns. She smiled. Like the river, exactly. We stood in silence, listening to the water lap against the dock. Migs hummed something under his breath, a tune without words. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was running from anything. I was exactly where I needed to be. The boathouse, the town, the people, they weren't perfect. But neither was I. And maybe that was what made it real. When I finally locked the door for the night, the carved letters above the frame caught the moonlight, Lou's Boathouse. I touched the wood, feeling the grain beneath my fingertips, the years of work and love that lived there. Thanks, Grandpa, I whispered. The river whispered back, steady and kind, as if to say, "You did good, kid. Keep building."